Welcome to the Lifestar Training and Education Center. My name is Todd, and I'm glad you are joining me to learn a little bit more about the Medsystem III IV infusion pumps that we use at Lifestar. This pump has been a source of a lot of frustration for some people, and I believe a good portion of that frustration is due to not fully understanding how the pump operates and what the alarms mean and how to troubleshoot and fix problems. Once you get pretty good at troubleshooting and setting up the pump in the beginning, you'll find that your transfers go quite a bit more smoothly. The topics I'd like to cover include the pump and the parts of the pump and what the names are, and a few little tidbits about what this flashing light means as opposed to a solid light, and so on. Then we'll go through the process of priming an administration set and then inserting the cassette from that set into the Medsystem III. From that point, we'll talk about programming just your basic infusion and also how to respond to a couple of the most common alarms. And then I'm going to have a section on just troubleshooting various problems and how to respond to all of the possible alarms that might appear. Some of these alarms are probably alarms you have dealt with. Some of these alarms might be alarms that you've dealt with incorrectly. And then some of the alarms you've never heard of and fortunately have never encountered, but you should be aware of what they mean and how to respond to them. Even if you're an experienced user of the Medsystem III pump, I promise you're going to learn something. Let's start with the pump and the various parts and buttons on that pump and what they mean. This is your Alaris Medsystem III. It might actually say CareFusion on the front, depending on when and where it was purchased. And the buttons are all very clearly marked. Your on-off button, the standard display will take you to the 3-channel display so you can see what all 3 channels A, B, and C are doing at the same time. More options will get you into some programming functions, and the start and stop button should be somewhat self-explanatory. Down here you have indicator lights by each channel. The one on the left should be flashing or solid green, and that means you are in the middle of an infusion. If it's flashing, it means you're on battery power, and if it is solid, it means you're on AC power. The red light over to the right of each of these A, B, and C buttons are your alarm buttons. If it is flashing slowly, it is an advisory alarm. If it is flashing rapidly, it is a problem alarm that requires your immediate attention. This is how we go about spiking a bag and priming an administration set for the Medsystem III. This is a full set because it has this drip chamber and spike attached to it. There's the rest of the tubing, and we take a quick peek at the cartridge, make sure it looks undamaged, verify that this slide clamp is properly closed all the way, and the piston pump in the back, you can operate back and forth a little bit to loosen it up. It might make it easier for the pump to begin pumping. Take a look at the rest of the line and make sure that there's no damage or problems or kinks. And then this drip chamber has a vent which needs to be open if you're spiking a bottle, closed if you're spiking a bag. Remove the safety cover, and once you do that, make sure this spike remains sterile. Don't touch anything with it. Take your saline bag and pull on the tab in order to get access. With a twisting back and forth motion, we insert the spike into the bag. Make sure we don't spike through the bag or through your finger, and make sure the spike goes all the way in. Then flip the bag over. You should see some fluid flowing right here, and squeeze the drip chamber in order to get about 1/3 fluid level up. Now we're ready to try and get some of these bubbles out of the line. There's a bubble right there, and we're going to watch that bubble as we allow fluid to flow to make sure that all of the air bubbles work their way out of the system. We invert the cassette and let the fluid begin flowing, watching the bubbles and tapping on the pressure dome. Also, tap hard enough to shake the entire cartridge to try and shake loose any bubbles that are sticking to the sides of the chamber. Once you have all the air bubbles out of the line, we pull on the slide clamp, and then make sure you check all of the roller clamps. If you put a roller clamp on, you want to make sure it is off. Otherwise, if you forget, the pump is going to give you an error saying that there's an occlusion in the line somewhere. And that's how we go about getting the administration set ready for service. The cassette on the administration set, whether it's a full set or half set, has the same cartridge, and the cartridge is the workhorse of the IV pump. The slide clamp is shown here extended, and when it is pulled out like this, it is pinching off the IV line to prevent any medication from flowing through to the patient if you happen to be connected to the patient as the cartridge is removed from the pump. The pressure dome up top is how the pump monitors the amount of PSI in the line. The tubing collar snaps into the bottom of the pump in order to make sure that the chamber where it monitors for bubbles is clearly visible to the air detection device. The first step in inserting a cartridge is to turn on the pump and wait for the 3 beeps. Then at a 45-degree angle, you insert the cartridge and make sure you press first on the clear plastic area, followed by the white slide clamp. The check air sensor alarm means the tubing is not yet properly seated in the air sensor. You need to press until you hear 3 beeps there. Now you're ready to program the pump. The first step in using the Medsystem III is to verify that you are in the correct device mode. As I turn this on, the first screen, it tells you what device you're in right here, general purpose. There's also down here the GP to tell you you're in general purpose mode. That is not the correct mode to be in, but it is the mode that it comes back from preventative maintenance, and when we send it out to repair, it's usually in general purpose mode. We need our pump to be in operating room 2 mode in order to allow us to dial in milliliters per hour to the 1/10 of a milliliter. In general purpose mode, it rounds up only to whole milliliters. If you find you're in the wrong mode, this is how you switch from one mode to the other. Click on More Options, and down here you see the word Device. Click on Device, and then click on Select until you get to Operating Room 2. And then click on Enter. If you come across somebody who tries to tell you that Operating Room 2 device is not mandatory and any of the other devices are just as good, this is what you should tell them. Every one of these devices has dozens and dozens of configurable options. Those options range from safety things like how much air can be in the line to issues of being practical, like what minimum pressure or maximum pressure should it try to pump at first, and then on second and third attempts, how much more should it increase the amount of pressure in the line to try and pump. All sorts of these configurations will make your life easier or harder if it's not configured properly. The only one of these devices that we know is configured in a way to make your life easier and have maximum safety along with maximum flexibility is Operating Room 2. I would be happy to spend some time reprogramming some of the other devices, but the software we use to program these pumps runs on Windows XP, which came out in 2001. Some of you may not have even been born in 2001. Some of you were dressed like this in 2001. So please just bear with us and use Operating Room 2 to maximize both your flexibility as well as patient safety. And then it says, press standard display to exit. And now if you look here at the bottom, it says OR2, so you're in the correct device mode. Now, as a simple exercise, we are going to program this to administer 125 milliliters per hour of whatever medication we're running. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to make sure I'm looking at the screen when it comes on to verify we're in OR2 mode, or if it flashed by me while somebody was talking to me and I turned it on, I double check down here at the bottom and make sure we're in OR2 mode. And you can see that the last person who used this pump was running 40 milliliters per hour of something, so we're going to need to reprogram this channel. I've already installed the cassette and everything is fine, and we are going to do a little programming. I need to click on A because this is the first channel A. So I click on that to select the channel. And then all of these numbers are from the last medication that was given, so we need to change them. So the first thing I need to do is change up top where it says the primary rate. This is how many milliliters per hour we're going to run. And right now it's set at 40, but we needed 125. So I need to move up to 125. And if you look at the bottom, my options are to either click on the up, the down, or the fast button. The fast button will change. Right now it's fast up, but if I click down, it now changes to fast down. So if it happened to be pointing down now, I would switch it to the up mode, and now I need to start increasing until I get to 125. So there's 100, there's 125 milliliters per hour, so I'm going to press enter. And now we have the volume remaining. The volume remaining is either however much you have left in the bag that you're trying to administer, or you might be trying to give a specific dose of something. An example of that would be when we're running ketamine in order to put somebody out before you're about to do an RSI, or you're just trying to knock them out and you're giving them their bolus dose. You might decide to run all your ketamine off the same bag, both your bolus and your maintenance dose. And so you need to run out your bolus dose first, and you might decide you're going to give 200 milliliters of ketamine. So your bolus dose is going to be 200, and then the pump will stop because that's what you told it the volume remaining is. So let's do that. We're going to go down and fast, and we're going to say 200. Oops, went too far, so click up. And there we are at 200 milliliters and enter. So I just told this pump to run 200 milliliters total and to stop infusing at that point. The next thing we want to do is track how much we've given overall. So the last patient got a total dose of 0.4 milliliters. We're going to hit clear in order to bring that number back down to 0. And then enter will bring you back up top. I double check my numbers. It tells us here the time in order to administer 125 milliliters per hour for a total of 200 milliliters should be about an hour and 36 minutes. And then we can click start and start running it. We can also go back to the standard display, or the pump is supposed to go back to standard display after 2 minutes of being in a single channel. And here we can see the volume infused number at the bottom is increasing, so we know fluid is moving, and the volume remaining is going down, and the flashing light by the A is green. That tells us everything is going well. So now we get an alarm and it starts flashing red and it says fluid side occluded. That means there is somewhere in the system between the pump and the supply of medication some kind of blockage that's preventing the flow. The first thing we do is hit quiet, and then we hit the channel to find out what's going on. And it says clear the occlusion between the channel and the container. It also reminds you to check the vent in case you're trying to draw fluid off of a bottle instead of a bag and you forgot to open the vent when you spiked it. And then press start to resume. Then verify flow. So I took a look at the line and I do not see any occlusions. I untangled the line, or I opened the roller, and now I hit start stop and I see if it resumes. And you see at the bottom, the volume infused continues to increase and the volume remaining continues to decrease. It looks like we fixed that problem. Now we have another alarm. This alarm is the patient side occluded, which means somewhere between the pump and the patient, some sort of an occlusion has happened in the line. It can frequently be patient movement. Maybe they bent their arm, or maybe something else happened. We have to check out everything, and the first thing we want to do is quiet the alarm. And then press the channel that has the problem, and it tells you what to do. Once I fix the problem, in this case, it was a roller, I can hit start stop and see if we fixed the problem, and the volume infused numbers go up, the remaining numbers go down, so things are proceeding correctly. You might want to tell the pump to do a little math on your behalf, like calculating a weight-based dose. In order to do that, we turn on the pump and go into the channel that we want to put in calc mode. Up at the top, click on More Options, and then at the bottom you'll see Calc On, and it takes you to a generic screen where you could just put in the concentration and the dose without worrying about what drug you're running. But we also have drugs that are programmed in, so we're going to scroll down to propofol in order to give a propofol infusion. The weight of the patient is listed at the top. Let's say this patient weighs 90 kilograms. It does the math to convert to pounds right there, 198.4 pounds. And now we need to enter the concentration and volume of the drug. We look at the bottle, it says 200 milligrams in 20 milliliters. So for concentration, we'll go to 200 milligrams. And then 20 milliliters. Our dose is going to be 25 mics per kg per minute, and that comes from our protocols or whatever the doctor ordered. And here it has calculated a rate of 13.5 milliliters per hour. And the volume infused is already at 0. And there we have it, 13.5 milliliters per hour, and a reminder that we're running 25 mics per kg per minute of propofol. Let's take a look at an example of a slightly more complicated infusion. Let's use the example of a patient that we're going to RSI, and we want to use ketamine, and we want to give a bolus of 200 milligrams of ketamine as quickly as possible and hopefully over 10 minutes or so. And then we want to switch to a maintenance infusion of 50 milligrams per hour. So the easiest way to do this is to mix 500 milligrams of ketamine, which is what comes in the vial, with 500 milliliters of saline. So we get a 500 bag, we put our ketamine in the bag, and now we want to give 200 milligrams, which is the same as 200 milliliters. I want to give it quickly. And then we want to switch to 50 milligram per hour, or same thing, 50 milliliter per hour, because it's a 1-to-1 concentration. So I turn on my pump and I make sure that it says operating room 2 on the front. And now I want to use a super user function. We go into the channel, click on more options, and then down here where we have the option to go into calc mode, we also have this secondary infusion. So we're going to click on the secondary infusion. And what we're going to do is use a first rate followed by a second rate. But with this pump, we use the first rate as the secondary infusion. They reverse it. So we're going to give 999, which is as fast as the pump will go. And we need to give 200 milligrams or 200 milliliters. So let's just pop that back up to 200. Hit enter. And down here, we're going to reset. Go to the top. And now I'm saying at 999 milliliters per hour, give 200 milliliters. And the pump is telling me that should take about 12 minutes. And that's a pretty good time rate. And then we're going to go up to more options and go back to the primary rate. And there's the 50 milliliter per hour. And since it's a 500 milliliter bag and we've given 200 already in a bolus, we need to say there's 300 milliliters left in the bag. 300 left. And we'll reset that bottom number. Now we need to go back to the original because we're going to start with the secondary rate. There's the secondary rate. And I could hit start right now and that would begin everything, but I don't want to have to wait for all 200 milliliters to go for this example. So I'm going to change that to a smaller number that doesn't take as long to work through. So for the example, we're going to pretend this is still 200 milliliters, but we're only going to give 15. If I hit start at this point and then go to my standard display, you notice how it's all dark here? That's telling me that's a secondary infusion rate. And we're going to watch this pump out at 999 milliliters an hour. The volume remaining, remember for the example it should be 200, but we're only going to give 15 milliliters. And watch what happens when it's done with that volume remaining. And now it's switched to your primary rate without you having to do anything. And you see the volume remaining is now 300 left. And the volume infused, it's starting the count again from 0 for the maintenance infusion. So you just programmed 2 rates on one line and you did not have to do anything once the initial bolus was complete. One alarm you likely encounter, but is very difficult for me to simulate for training purposes, is the check fluid side alarm. Now there's fluid side occluded and patient side occluded. Those are easy for me to simulate, but check fluid side is a little more difficult. What's happening when you see a check fluid side is the pump is saying, I'm getting a lot of resistance in trying to pump this fluid for you. And you should check to see if there's a problem with the circuit. If there's no problem, if you want, I can try pumping a little bit harder and see if I can overcome that resistance. While I was giving an example of another way to program your pump, this did come up, and so that's what you're looking at here, and I'm going to show you how to resolve this problem. When we click this alarm, you'll notice there's a confirm message here. It's telling me we have a fluid side problem, and it's asking me to confirm that I've read the message. What's happening here is the pump is saying, I can pump a little bit harder if I need to, but I don't want to do it until you've checked to make sure it's safe to do so. So you want to check all of your lines and your supply, the medication, the bag, and everything. But if it's all good, I can hit confirm, and it gives a check mark. And then I'm going to hit start. And now it's pumping a little bit harder in order to try and overcome whatever resistance there was. If you've been encountering the check fluid side message and you click on the alarm and quiet it, but you don't hit the confirm button, you haven't changed anything. You haven't told the pump to try harder. And then you go back and hit start again, and it just goes back and you experience the same amount of resistance. The pump is not trying any harder, and so you get the alarm a second and a third time. This is one of the reasons people come to me and say that these pumps are terrible, they always alarm, I can never get them to work right. Well, you haven't told the pump to do anything different. And if it's not doing anything different, you're going to repeat the same problem. So please hit the confirm button anytime you see it in order to get the pump to try harder. We've already discussed several of the alarms that you come across, for example, the fluid side occluded or patient side occluded alarms, which require you to check the tubing and make sure that it's not pinched off, kinked, or there are no roller clamps or other devices that are preventing the fluid from flowing. We also talked about the check air sensor, which should not be confused with the air in line warning. The check air sensor is usually obtained when you first insert the cassette, but you have not yet fully seated the tubing collar in the air sensor recess. If you get this message, you should press on the tubing and make sure it is seated fully until you get the 3 beeps. If you see an advisory for channel not in use, that means you inserted a cassette, but you haven't used the channel for 2 minutes, and it's reminding you that the channel is set but not being used actively. In order to stop this alarm from coming up, you can press the standby button, and that will place it in standby mode, and it will turn off the 2-minute timer. If you get the air in line message, that means it is sensing actual air bubbles in the IV line. In order to clear this, you may have to pull the cartridge out and reprime the line, or you may press the clear air soft key, and that will advance the fluid through the tubing 0.2 milliliters at a time. It won't let you continue to do this indefinitely, but you can keep pressing the button in an effort to get that air bubble moving on down the road. If you get a cassette jammed advisory message, it means the piston is too difficult for the pump to move. You may be able to clear that piston by removing the cassette and operating it manually. Hopefully you did that while you were putting the cassette in and you avoided this problem. It's also possible that the piston sleeve right here is out of position, and that can be corrected by moving it with your fingers into the proper position. If the cassette jammed message recurs time and time again and you've tried it in a new channel, you may have a defective cassette, and then you'll have to replace the line. The cassette not latched advisory alarm means that the cassette has not been properly seated in the pump, and you need to press on the clear plastic section followed by the white plastic section in order to get the cassette properly seated. If you get the faulty cassette alarm, it means that the cassette appears to the pump to be completely inoperable. You can manually inspect and operate the piston pump to see if that fixes the problem, but otherwise the solution is going to be to replace the administration set. If you get the pumping latch closed message, this is before you put the cassette in. It means the latch is in the incorrect position, and you can fix this with your finger by reaching in and pressing here in order to lower the latch, so when you put the cassette in, it will be in the proper place in order to operate the piston. If you get the rate volume settings cleared message, it just means that there were numbers that were inputted into the channel and then you changed the device type, and it's cautioning you that whatever data was already in there has been erased because the newly selected device might be incompatible with those rates or volumes. If you get the channel out of order message, it means that the safety checks that were built into the software have detected a faulty channel, and that channel should no longer be used until preventative maintenance or repair can be done. If it provides you with a fault number, it's very important that you write that fault number down, so when you notify dispatch and you notify Lifestar that the channel is out of service, we know what fault number came up with the alarm. I thank you for joining me today to learn a little bit about the Medsystem III IV pump. If you have any questions, contact the Lifestar Training and Education Center, and I'll be happy to help you out. See you on the next one.